tutorial is going to teach you how to create navigation buttons using Actionscript 3. So just grab yourself a rectangle tool, which is right here, and draw a rectangle, just like so. Grab some text because you need to label your button, make sure it's black. And we're just going to write next. So interesting looking font I've chosen there. Maybe I should probably go with something more mainstream, but maybe not. Make sure that your text box is in fact static text. Once you've got your text on top of the box, highlight the lot, right click, convert to symbol, and we're going to call this one next btn, and make sure it's a button type. Press OK. If you double click on the button, you'll see that the timeline will change to have up, over, down, and hit. We're going to press F6 3 times, 1, 2, 3. And now we're going to change the different conditions of this button. So this up is when you look at a button without moving your mouse over it. Over is when you roll over. Down is when you press it. Hit is the area that is clickable. So with over, I'm just going to change the color. So just using your selection tool, click on the color. And I'm just going to go to a orange that's slightly lighter than the one I had before. Might change down as well to the same color. And hit can stay the same. Once you're happy with that, you can click on the back arrow, click on scene 1, or just double click in a gray area, and it'll take you back out of the button. Okay, now we need to make a frame that we're going to go to. So we're just going to press F6 again on our timeline. That'll make a duplicate of the frame we just had. And we are going to grab this button here, right click it, and say break apart. And we're going to change this text to back. And now we highlight all that again and convert it to a symbol. And we're going to call this one back btn. Do the same thing as before, double click it, press F6 3 times to fill in these keyframes, go to over, change that color to something slightly different, and also on down. That's it, and back arrow. Alright, so now we got 2 frames, one that says next, one that says back. Now it's time to get some ActionScript in here. Alright, generally it's good practice to make a new layer, and this is where we put our actions on. So we're going to name this layer by double clicking it and writing actions. And because we've got 2 frames, we need to press F6 on this second frame, because at the moment frame 1 continues to frame 2. You can tell by the little shape there. But if you press F6, they become 2 individual keyframes, one for frame 1, one for frame 2. So we need to give our buttons instance names. So to do that, you click on your button, and up here in instance name, we're going to call this one next btn1. And we're going to go to the next frame, and this is the back button. We're going to call this one back btn1. Notice the way in which I've written it, the capital B designates the new sort of word back button. Anyway, let's go back to actions layer. On frame number 1, press F9, and this is where we're going to put in our code. So the way ActionScript works in terms of buttons is you need to have a button that does something, so a function that does something, and then a event listener that listens for that function. So we're going to start with the listener. So firstly, we write down the button's name that we just named it then, which was next btn1, and then we write dot, and then we write add event listener. And this is going to allow Flash to listen for something. And in this case, we want to listen for a mouse event, and we want the click of the mouse. And now we need to tell Flash what we're going to call this function. So we've got a listener listening for mouse click, and when it finds it, it needs to call it something. And so we're going to call it next click. You can call it anything really, like you could call it pineapples and it would still work. But generally you want to give something a useful name, so we know that this is going to be the next click. Some people like to call, this is what you'd call the handler. So sometimes they might call it next handle or something like that, and every time you have a button you'd assign its handler the name handle, but I'm just going to call this one next click, and then you close your bracket, semicolon. So there's our event listener. It's ready to go, but at the moment it's listening for something that doesn't exist, so we need to make the function. So we're going to write function, and then we called it before next click, so we're going to call this next click. So it's listening for next click, and next click is a mouse event, so we're going to write you can write event or you can write EVT, it doesn't really matter. And we're going to call this one mouse event, because that's what we're going to do when we click on this function. And we don't want it to return anything, so we're going to write void. This just saves Flash a bit of time, because otherwise it'll be looking to return a value, and we don't need to on a button. So press enter again, and then open a parentheses, which is a squiggly bracket. And if you press enter, it'll close your parentheses for you and make this little drop down thingamajiggery to show you that you need to put your effect in here. So we have cause on the click of the next button, something needs to happen, and that's what we're going to put in the middle here. What we want to do is go to the next frame, and it's really easy to do. You write next frame, open, close, semicolon. So this is going to take us to the next frame. Now you'll notice that automatically a little while ago this thing popped up here because we added in the mouse event option. It automatically imports flash.events.mouse event. So that's so that the mouse event can actually function. All right, cool. Now, by default, Flash will constantly just spam between frames 1 and 2. So what we need to do is put in a stop command. So I'm just going to press enter a couple times and write stop, open close bracket, semicolon. And this is going to stop it spamming itself over and over again. So what we're going to do now is highlight and copy this code that we just made, because we're going to pretty much paste it in the next frame, which is going to go back. So click on frame 2, click right here, press paste, and stop is there, of course. We know that the button on this frame is in fact called, where is it? Back BTN1. So we're instead just going to change the code that we just made here from next BTN1 to back BTN1. It's still going to be an event listener. It's still going to be listening for a click, but instead of us calling this next click, this always needs to be unique for each button. We're going to call this one back click. And we're going to obviously refer to it here again. And so we're going to change that to back click. And instead of it going to the next frame, we want it to be previous frame. So we write prev frame. Now we can close this. And if we want to test this thing and see if it works, we press Control Enter. It turns into a Swift movie. And you can see here, if I press next, it goes to frame number 2. And if I press back, it goes back to frame number 1. One more thing we're going to do is we're going to create a button that's going to jump between frames. So it's very easy to make a action script that'll go from frame 1 to 2. But what if you want to jump from frame 1 to 5 or 1 to 5,000? You need to create a slightly different bit of action script, and I'm just going to quickly add in some frames here. I'm just going to press F6 a few times until I get to a spot out here that's sort of by itself. So we're just going to go to, I don't know, if you just make a couple of frames here until you get, I don't know, somewhere between 5 and 8. What we can do is delete this gap here. So just delete these by pressing delete on your keyboard. And here we are in frame number 8, as you can see down here. And this is going to be a button that takes us all the way back to the start. So what we're going to do here is rename this one to restart BTN. This will take us all the way back to frame 1. But we obviously need to have a button that takes us all the way to frame number 8 so we can get here. So we're just going to copy this one here, copy paste, and I'm going to stick it up here, and we're going to call this one jump BTN. And just so we know what's going on, I'm going to write a little label here. I'm just going to write jump with a little arrow. And now we're going to modify our code in our ActionScript layer. So here on frame number 1, we're going to press F9, and we're going to make another event listener and some more code. So we're going to copy this one, go down here. It doesn't really matter how many spaces you do. I like to make quite big gaps so that it's quite easy to see what does what. So paste. This was called jump BTN because we named it before, so I'm going to write jump. And we're going to call this over here jump click. And obviously we need to refer to it here in the function as jump. And instead of it going to next frame, what we're going to say is go to and stop. Open bracket, and we're going to specify the frame number, which is 8 in this case. Close the bracket, semicolon, and now this button will take us to frame number 8. Now we need to click on frame number 8 in our timeline here, and we're going to paste that same code again that we had previously copied, and also put a stop command up here. Stop, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon, and this button was called replay button. If we click here, you can see it. Sorry, it was restart button. So we're going to write restart BTN, and this is going to be called restart click, and this is going to get called restart click as well, and it's going to go to and stop frame number 1. All right, press on the X, and that should all be good. So just press Control Enter. Jump BTN 1. We've got a bit of an error here, and you can tell when there's an error because it just spams like this. It's because we called it Jump BTN 1 before, when it should have been called just Jump BTN. So if we go back here, click on that. Jump BTN is the name, and the code says Jump BTN 1. So if we just get rid of that 1, and then press Control Enter to test it again, it should work. So jump BTN 1. So jump button takes us to all the way out here to frame number 8. We go back to it. Next takes us to frame number 2. Hard to tell, so let's put some markers on it. Hey, so grab your brush tool, frame number 2. We're going to write a big 2 on it. We're going to go out here to frame number 8, write a big 8 on it. Now if we press Control Enter, you can see that it takes us to frame number 8. We go back, we go next, takes us to frame number 2, we go back, and so on and so forth. So we've got some navigation. We can jump to specific frames, and we can also go previous and back. Now I'd like to point out that I've also, when I wrote these numbers in here, I put them on my actions layer, which is technically a bit of a no-no. You shouldn't really put any like shapes or anything on your actions layer. It should just be reserved for actions. So technically you should draw this on like a different layer. But I'm just going to leave it for now because it still works. So there you go. That's basic navigation using Actionscript 3. Thanks for watching.